Hi, it's Jenni Smith. I'm sewing up block 2 of the Splendid Sampler 2, which is Milk and Cookies by Rebecca Bryan. It's a really lovely block. It has some needle turn applique and some half square triangles for the background. I did my version in a slightly different order, so I actually started with step 4, which is making this ring here, partly because I wasn't sure of my fabric choice for the background, so I thought if I actually made that part first I could then try different layouts. So I'm going to talk you through what I did with some tips and tricks. For the wedge pattern, I obviously cut out the paper pattern with seam allowance, and then for template plastic I used some packaging and just recycled that and cut myself a clear template there. And what it says in the instructions is that you can cut these out as squares first and then down into wedges, but I just had plenty of fabric and thought it would be quicker to lay the wedge down on my fabric so I could choose the design that I wanted. And in order to do the outline, the back of this fabric's also quite dark, so I've actually decided just to mark it up on the right side of the fabric, because all of these seam allowances this will all disappear in the seam allowance, so you won't actually see the markings. And because it's dark fabric, I had this Prim Sashko pen, which is just a very fine chalk marker, so I held my template in place and used this to draw around my shape like so, and then went in and cut that out so you can see the outline there. Constructing the wedge circle was fairly straightforward. I just pinned and stitched these lines, did it in segments as it suggests in the instructions, and then I actually pressed the seams open before I put in the last piece, just so that I had easier access to it. And I wasn't too worried. I made sure that my outside edges were always aligned. If my inside was a little off, then I was aware that this would finally be covered anyway by the applique circle, so I didn't worry about that too much. And now that I've got this constructed, I can lay it out on different backgrounds, which is why I did this block this way around, so I can see what colour schemes I think work to make it pop. If when you've completed this circle, I pressed it on the back and on the front, but I did feel like it was just still a little bit bumpy, so I got my nice box of Aurifil 828, which I'm going to use for the next step, and I just lay them on top of it and left it overnight, and actually it made that lay really nice and flat to work with the next morning. These are the A and B squares that you cut out at 3 7/8, and I had 2 colourways because I wasn't sure until I'd made the circle here how it would work. And even though these haven't been made into half square triangles yet, by laying them out like this and popping this on top, I can get an impression of if I feel the block is going to work. So this is one colourway option with the Liberty Quilting cottons, and then I wasn't sure, because there's so many beautiful florals, whether to go for this option, which is busy but nice. And then I'm thinking for the centre circle I'll use a pink, so again I can just put that on. Sometimes at this stage I take a photo on my phone and then I can just look back at it later and see what I think, but I think I'm leaning towards this colourway. And doing the block this way around means that I haven't committed to making these into half square triangles yet, so I'm not wasting any fabric. I have turned under with the iron, so just pressed under the edge of my ring there, and I've pinned it in position. I've got an Aurifil 828 thread and a needle, and I'm going to go and find a quiet place in my house and avoid my 3 children now so that I can enjoy blind stitching that into position. I've just stitched this in place and it's gone on really nicely. I've used the Aurifil 828 thread and some tulip between needles, a size 9, and they seem to work really nicely together. Obviously just keeping the tension on the needle not too tight so that there's no snapping. And I'm just going to trim off those threads and then I can add on my final central circle and then the block will be done. One thing to bear in mind is that the edges of the block do fray a little when you're handling it to stitch around the edge and do applique. So what I was thinking on future blocks is I might make the final block just a little bit bigger so that I've got plenty of scope to trim it down to 6.5 inches at the end. For step 7, I have made a cardboard template from the circle and I'm going to use that on my fabric. So if I could also make a clear one if you were really fussy cutting, but I can see that I'm going to centre it on the design here, and then just with a pencil or whichever your method you prefer, I'm going round and marking a scant 1/4 inch seam, which I will then cut out, and then I'll show you the next, my favourite method for creating circles for applique. So I've got my foil here, kitchen foil about 6 inches square with the shiny side down. Then I'm going to take my fabric with the right side down and my cardboard template squared in there, and then you can start to bring up the edges of the foil, just gradually pinch it all the way around so that you can feel it's taking the edge of the fabric. Like that, and then press that in, smooth it round so that there's no creases, and then I'm going to press down with the heat of the iron onto this. Just allow the foil to cool so you don't burn your fingers, and then you can unwrap like so, like opening a present, and then you can gently remove the cardboard, and then you've got a very nice pretty circle ready to applique on. So here it is, my finished block. I really love the colours that I've picked, especially for the centre. I've learned a lot. I like appliqué or applique, however you say it. And I've learned how to do a circle like that with those smaller wedges. I'm slightly under, I'm just going to be honest and show you that what I was saying about the fraying as I was handling it to stitch means that I'm going to just be a little bit short for a 6.5 inch block, and when I make this up into the final quilt I'll have to allow for that and do a slightly skinnier seam allowance, but you live and learn. That's what these things are for. And like I said, next time I think I'd go with cut myself a slightly bigger background, so make the half square triangles slightly bigger to do all that hand sewing, and then if it frays I've got some scope just to trim it down. So thank you, Rebecca, for a lovely block.